The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows of Maya Chen's modest two-story home in Galveston, Texas. Outside, Hurricane Delilah was making landfall with devastating force, turning the quiet coastal neighborhood into a war zone. Of flying debris and torrential rain, Maya pressed her face against the reinforced glass, watching her neighbor's porch furniture cartwheel down the flooded street like tumbleweeds. She'd lived through hurricanes before, but nothing quite like this. What she didn't know was that in the next few hours, her simple act of human kindness would change her life forever and reveal that sometimes the most extraordinary people come, disguised as ordinary strangers seeking shelter from the storm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had been preparing for Hurricane Delilah for 3 solid days. The Weather Service had upgraded it from a Category 2 to a Category 4 storm in just 18 hours, sending most of Galveston into a panic. The highways leading inland were clogged with evacuees, but Maya couldn't leave. Her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had refused to abandon her cat colony, and Maya couldn't bring herself to leave the 78-year-old woman alone. "You're crazy, girl," her sister Keisha had said over the phone that morning. "That storm's gonna tear the roof clean off your house." Maya had laughed it off, but now, listening to the wind scream past her windows, she wondered if Keisha might have been right. She'd done everything she could to prepare. The windows were boarded up with plywood. The bathtub was filled with fresh water, and she had enough canned food and batteries to last a week. Her small home sat on higher ground than most of the neighborhood, which had saved her during Hurricane Harvey years earlier. The power had gone out around 2 in the afternoon, just as the storm's outer bands began lashing the coast. Maya lit candles throughout the house and settled in with a book, trying to ignore the increasingly violent sounds outside. That's when she heard the first knock. It was barely audible over the storm's roar, but Maya's trained ear caught it. As a nurse at Galveston General, she developed an instinct for picking up subtle sounds, the change in a patient's breathing, a call for help down a busy hallway. She grabbed a flashlight and made her way to the front door. "Who's there?" she called out. "Please, we need help," came a woman's voice, barely audible through the reinforced door. "Our car broke down." Maya hesitated for just a moment. She'd heard stories of people taking advantage of natural disasters, but the desperation in the woman's voice sounded genuine. She unbolted the door and pulled it open against the wind's resistance. 3 figures stood huddled on her porch, soaked to the bone and shivering. A woman in her 30s clutched a small child, a boy who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Behind them stood a tall man in an expensive-looking coat that was now completely waterlogged. "Thank God," the woman gasped. "I'm Sarah Martinez. This is my son Tommy, and this is—" She gestured toward the man. "Marcus. Our car died about half a mile from here. We've been walking for 20 minutes. Maya didn't hesitate. "Get inside, all of you, quickly." She ushered them into her warm, candle-lit living room and immediately went into crisis mode. The little boy was shaking uncontrollably, his lips blue from the cold. Maya grabbed towels from the linen closet and handed them out, then hurried to her bedroom to find dry clothes. "I've got some sweats that might fit you," she told Sarah, "and I think I have an old t-shirt that could work for Tommy. Sir, you might have to make do with a bathrobe for now. I don't have any men's clothes that would fit you." The man, Marcus, looked around the modest living room with its well-worn furniture and family photos on the mantel. "This is incredibly kind of you," he said quietly. "We're complete strangers." Maya shrugged as she handed out the dry clothes. "Strangers are just people you haven't helped yet. That's what my grandmother used to say." As they changed into dry clothes, Maya learned their story. Sarah was a single mother who worked as a hotel housekeeper. She'd been trying to evacuate with Tommy when her car broke down on the flooded roads. Marcus had been walking in the same direction when he found them stranded and offered to help them find shelter. "I don't understand why you didn't evacuate earlier," Maya said gently, setting up makeshift beds with blankets and pillows in the living room. Sarah's face tightened with embarrassment. "I couldn't afford to miss work until the last minute. I'm barely making rent as it is, and if I'd taken off earlier—" She trailed off, focusing on tucking Tommy into his blanket nest on the couch. Maya felt a familiar pang in her chest. She'd grown up in similar circumstances, her mother working multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, always one emergency away from financial disaster. It was part of what had driven her to become a nurse, the desire to help people when they were most vulnerable. "Well, you're safe now," Maya said firmly. "We'll ride this out together." As the night wore on, Hurricane Delilah unleashed her full fury on Galveston. The wind reached sustained speeds of 145 miles per hour, turning raindrops into horizontal bullets that pelted the boarded windows. Maya's house shook and groaned, but the sturdy structure held firm. Tommy had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from their ordeal. Sarah sat beside him, stroking his hair and humming softly. Marcus had positioned himself near the window, occasionally peering through a gap in the plywood to check on the storm's progress. "You don't have to stay by the window," Maya told him. "The boards will hold." Marcus turned toward her, and in the candlelight she could see the concern etched on his face. "I've never been in anything like this before," he admitted. "I'm usually elsewhere during storm season." There was something about the way he said it that made Maya curious, but she didn't pry. Everyone had their reasons for being where they were. Around midnight, they heard a tremendous crash from outside, followed by the sound of splintering wood. Maya grabbed her flashlight and carefully looked through the peephole in her front door. A massive oak tree had fallen across the street, crushing a neighbor's fence and barely missing their house. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, looking over her shoulder. "That tree must have been standing for 50 years. 63, Maya corrected. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me her late husband planted it when they moved here in 1961. She's going to be heartbroken." And they returned to the living room, where Sarah was still keeping vigil over Tommy. The little boy stirred in his sleep, and Sarah began humming again, a gentle lullaby that seemed to calm him. "You're a good mother," Maya observed quietly. Sarah smiled sadly. "I try to be. It's not easy doing it alone, especially with everything so expensive now. Tommy deserves better than what I can give him." "He deserves a mother who loves him," Maya replied. "That's worth more than money." Marcus, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "What kind of work do you do, Maya?" "I'm a nurse at Galveston General, emergency department mostly, though I've been picking up extra shifts in pediatrics to help." "I pay for my house. That must be challenging work," Maya nodded. "It is, but it's what I'm meant to do. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She was the strongest person I ever knew, took care of everyone in our neighborhood, never asked for anything in return. She always said that we're all just walking each other home." As she spoke, Maya noticed Marcus watching her intently, as if he was trying to memorize her words. There was something about his attention that felt different from polite conversation, more focused, more deliberate. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside Maya's small house, an unlikely family had formed. Sarah eventually dozed off in the armchair, her hand still resting protectively on Tommy's shoulder. Marcus remained awake, occasionally checking his phone, though Maya noticed he had no signal. "Worried about someone?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked up from his phone, startled. "What? Oh, no. Well, yes, but it's complicated." Maya waited, sensing he wanted to say more. "I have responsibilities," he said finally. "People depend on me, being stuck here, unable to communicate. It's difficult. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is be exactly where we are, Maya said. My grandmother used to say that God puts us where we need to be, even when we don't understand why. Marcus studied her face in the candlelight. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, nothing makes sense. Outside, Hurricane Delilah continued her assault on the Texas coast, but inside the small house on Maple Street, 4 strangers had found something precious in the storm, the simple human connection that reminds us we're never truly alone. Dawn broke grey and ominous over Galveston, though the hurricane's fury had barely diminished. Maya woke to the sound of something heavy scraping against the side of her house, probably a neighbor's garbage can or patio furniture carried by the relentless wind. She checked her watch. 6:30 a.m. She'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep. In the armchair, Tommy was awake, sitting up on the couch and staring wide-eyed at the boarded windows. The poor kid looked terrified by the continuous roar outside. "Hey there, buddy," Maya whispered, not wanting to wake Sarah, who was still curled up in the other chair. "How are you feeling?" "When will it stop?" Tommy asked, his voice small and shaky. Maya sat down beside him. "Storms like this usually last about a day. Once they hit land, we're probably halfway through the worst of it." Marcus appeared from the kitchen, carrying Maya's battery-powered radio. "I've been trying to get news updates," he said quietly. "The storm surge is worse than they predicted. Downtown Galveston is under 8 feet of water." Maya's heart sank. Her hospital was downtown. She thought about her colleagues who might have been trapped there, about the patients who couldn't be evacuated. "Any word on the hospital?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They mentioned it briefly. Emergency power is holding, but they're completely cut off. No one can get in or out. Sarah stirred at their voices, blinking awake in confusion before remembering where she was. "Is it over?" "Not yet," Maya said gently. "But we're safe here." As the morning progressed, they settled into an unexpected rhythm. Maya made breakfast using her camping stove. Pancakes from a mix she kept for emergencies, along with canned fruit and instant coffee. It wasn't gourmet, but it was warm and filling. Tommy perked up considerably with food in his stomach and began exploring Maya's house with the curiosity of a child. He discovered her collection of medical textbooks and asked endless questions about the anatomical diagrams. "Are you a doctor?" he asked Maya. "I'm a nurse. I help take care of people when they're sick or hurt." "Like superheroes," Maya laughed. "Something like that, except we wear scrubs instead of capes." Meanwhile, Marcus had become increasingly agitated as the morning wore on. He kept checking his phone, even though the cell towers were clearly down. Maya noticed him pacing by the windows, his jaw tight with frustration. "You're going to wear a hole in my floor," she finally said. Marcus stopped pacing and ran his hands through his hair. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to being disconnected." "What kind of work do you do?" Sarah asked, where she was helping Tommy with a coloring book Maya had found. Marcus hesitated. "Business. Import and export, mostly. I travel a lot." It was a vague answer, but Sarah didn't push. Maya, however, filed away the evasion. In her years as a nurse, she'd developed a radar for when people weren't telling the whole truth, not necessarily lying, but definitely editing. Around noon, the wind suddenly shifted direction, and Maya felt her house shudder in a way it hadn't before. Through the radio they learned they were now in the hurricane's eye wall, the most dangerous part of the storm. "We need to get away from the windows," Maya said urgently. "Even with the boards, this is when glass can blow out." They gathered in Maya's interior hallway, bringing blankets and the radio. It was cramped with 4 people, but it was the safest spot in the house. Tommy pressed close to his mother, while Marcus sat with his back against the wall, looking deeply uncomfortable with the tight quarters. "Tell us about yourself, Maya," Sarah said, probably trying to distract Tommy from the terrifying sounds outside. "Do you have a family?" Maya adjusted her position on the floor. "Just my sister Keisha and her family up in Houston. She's probably worried sick right now, but she knows I'm stubborn." "What made you want to be a nurse?" "My grandmother, really. She took care of everyone in our neighborhood, unofficial nurse, counselor, and peacekeeper all rolled into one. When she got sick with cancer, I spent months in the hospital with her, saw how the nurses there weren't just medical professionals, they were advocates. They fought for their patients, made sure they were heard and treated with dignity." Maya paused, remembering those difficult months. "There was this one nurse, Patricia Williams. My grandmother was in so much pain, but the doctors kept dismissing her complaints. Patricia didn't give up. She documented everything, pushed for better pain management, and stayed late to make sure my grandmother was comfortable. She probably saved the last months of my grandmother's life from being unbearable." "That's beautiful," Sarah said softly. Marcus, who had been silent, spoke up. "What happened to your grandmother?" "She passed away during my senior year of high school, but she lived long enough to see me get accepted to nursing school. Her last words to me were, 'Make sure you're the Patricia Williams for someone else's grandmother.'" The house shook violently, and they heard something crash against the roof. Tommy whimpered and buried his face in Sarah's shoulder. "It's okay, baby," Sarah murmured, but Maya could hear the fear in her voice too. "Tell us about Tommy," Maya said, hoping to redirect the focus. "What's his favorite thing to do?" Sarah's face lit up despite their circumstances. "He loves to build things. Legos, blocks, cardboard boxes, anything he can turn into something else. He wants to be an architect when he grows up." "Really?" Marcus looked genuinely interested. "What kind of buildings does he want to design?" Tommy lifted his head shyly. "Houses for people who don't have them. Mama says some people have to sleep outside, and that's not fair." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. This 5-year-old had more compassion than most adults she knew. "That's a wonderful dream," Marcus said quietly. "The world needs more people who want to help others." As the eye of the hurricane passed over them, there was a brief, eerie calm. Maya knew this was the most dangerous time. People often thought the storm was over and ventured outside, only to be caught when the backside of the eye wall hit with renewed fury. "Nobody leaves the house," she warned. "This is just the middle of the storm. The second half is coming." During the calm, Marcus finally got a weak cell signal. Maya watched his face change as he read through what must have been dozens of missed messages and voicemails. His expression grew increasingly troubled. "Bad news?" she asked. Marcus looked up, seeming surprised that she'd been watching him. My colleagues are worried. They haven't heard from me since yesterday afternoon. They don't know where you are. I was supposed to be on a flight to New York yesterday morning. When the storm changed course so quickly, I thought I could still make it out, but the airport's closed before I could get there." Sarah frowned. "Didn't you hear the evacuation orders?" "They started those 2 days ago." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I was dealing with some urgent business matters. I thought I had more time." Maya sensed there was more to the story, but before she could ask, the wind began picking up again. The calm was over, and the backside of Hurricane Delilah was about to hit, them with potentially even greater force than the front. "Here we go again," Maya said, checking her supplies. "This part usually moves faster, but it can be just as intense." As if summoned by her words, the house began to shake once more. But something had changed during their time in the hallway. The 4 strangers had become something more, a temporary family bound together by circumstance and the simple human need for connection in the face of nature's awesome power. Tommy had fallen asleep against Marcus's shoulder, and Maya noticed that the mysterious businessman hadn't moved despite the uncomfortable position. Sarah was quietly humming again, and Maya found herself thinking about her grandmother's words. Sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be. She just wondered what lesson this particular storm was meant to teach them all. By late afternoon, Hurricane Delilah's backside had passed, leaving behind an unnatural quiet that felt almost more unsettling than the storm itself. Maya cautiously removed one of the plywood boards from her kitchen window and peered outside. The world had been transformed into an apocalyptic landscape of debris, fallen trees, and standing water that stretched as far as she could see. "Dear God," she whispered. Her neighbor's house across the street had lost its entire second-story roof. Cars were flipped upside down or perched impossibly on top of each other like a child's abandoned toys. The massive oak tree that had fallen during the night had taken down power lines, which now snaked dangerously through the floodwater. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked, approaching with Tommy clinging to her hand. Maya stepped back from the window. "It's going to take months to clean up, maybe years." Marcus joined them at the window, and Maya watched his face carefully. Instead of the shock she expected, she saw something else, a calculating look, as if he was already mentally cataloguing the damage and planning something. "The infrastructure will need to be completely rebuilt," he said quietly. "Water treatment, electrical, grid, telecommunications, roads." "Are you in construction?" Maya asked. Marcus seemed to catch himself. "No, I've seen hurricane damage before, in other places." The evasion bothered Maya more than she wanted to admit. Over the past 18 hours, she'd shared her home, her food, and her most personal stories with this man, but he remained a mystery. With the storm past, practical concerns took priority. Maya's house had survived remarkably well, a few loose shingles and a broken gutter, but the structure was sound. However, the neighborhood was without power, water, or phone service, and the flooding made leaving impossible. "We need to check on Mrs. Rodriguez," Maya said, grabbing her rain boots. "She lives next door, and she's elderly." "I'll come with you," Marcus offered immediately. They waded through knee-deep water filled with debris, garbage, and things Maya preferred not to identify. Mrs. Rodriguez's house sat slightly lower than Maya's, and water had clearly entered the first floor. Maya knocked on the door and called out in Spanish, "Mrs. Rodriguez, ¿está bien?" A weak voice answered from inside. "Maya, ay Dios mío, I'm upstairs." They found the elderly woman trapped in her bedroom. A fallen bookshelf had pinned her leg, and she'd been stuck there since the flooding began. Marcus immediately assessed the situation and positioned himself to lift the heavy wooden furniture. "On 3, he told Maya. 1, 2. Together they freed Mrs. Rodriguez, who was dehydrated and weak but otherwise uninjured. As Maya helped her to safety, she noticed Marcus examining the water damage downstairs with the same calculating expression he'd worn earlier. "The foundation is compromised," he said when Maya joined him. "She can't stay here." "She can stay with us until we can get help," Maya replied without hesitation. Marcus studied her face. "You don't even think about it, do you?" "Think about what?" "Taking people in, helping. It's just automatic for you." Maya shrugged. "What else would I do?" They made their way back to Maya's house, supporting Mrs. Rodriguez between them. The elderly woman immediately fussed over Tommy, speaking to him in rapid Spanish and producing somehow dry cookies from her purse to share. As evening approached, Maya realized they were facing a new challenge. The radio reported that rescue operations wouldn't begin for at least another day, possibly longer. Roads were impassable, and emergency services were overwhelmed with more critical situations. "We're going to need to ration our food and water," Maya announced. "I have enough for maybe 3 days if we're careful." Sarah looked stricken. "Maya, you've already done so much. We can't keep imposing on you like this." "Where exactly would you go?" Maya asked practically. "There's 6 feet of water outside." And no way to call for help. We're all in this together now. That evening, they established routines that felt surprisingly domestic. Mrs. Rodriguez, despite her ordeal, insisted on helping prepare dinner, sharing spices and techniques that transformed Maya's emergency rations into something almost festive. Tommy played quietly with some building blocks Maya had found in a closet, creating elaborate structures that he claimed were hurricane-proof houses. Marcus had grown increasingly restless, as his phone occasionally picked up weak signals. Maya watched him step outside repeatedly, trying to make calls that never seemed to connect. "You're going to make yourself sick with worry," she finally told him when he came back inside, frustrated after another failed attempt. "You don't understand," Marcus said, his composure finally cracking. "I have a board meeting tomorrow. Investors. There are decisions that can't wait." "They'll have to wait," Maya said simply. "Unless you can walk on water, you're not going anywhere." Marcus sat down heavily at her kitchen table. "People are depending on me. Thousands of jobs, major contracts. If I'm not there, the world will keep turning," Maya said, settling across from him. "Trust me, I've learned that the hard way. When my grandmother was dying, I thought the hospital couldn't function without me working every shift. Turns out, life went on. The important things got handled. This is different." "Is it?" Maya challenged. "Or are you just afraid of not being in control?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Maya's direct gaze stopped him. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been listening from the living room, called out in accented English, "Mijo, sometimes God keeps us still so we can see what matters." Later that night, unable to sleep, Maya found Marcus sitting on her back porch, staring out at the flooded neighborhood. The water reflected the few emergency lights still functioning, creating an almost ethereal scene. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, settling beside him. "I keep thinking about what you said, about control." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I built my entire life around being indispensable, being the person who has to make the decisions, who everyone else depends on. What kind of business are you really in, Marcus?" He was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally he said, "I run a company. A large company. We employ about 50,000 people across 12 countries. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the humid air. "What kind of company?" "Technology, mainly. Software development, cloud services, some manufacturing. We work with governments, hospitals, schools." He trailed off, then added quietly, "You've probably used our products without knowing it." The pieces began clicking together in Maya's mind. The expensive clothes, the constant phone checking, the way he talked about infrastructure and damage assessment, his panic about missing meetings. "You're not just some businessman, are you?" Marcus turned to look at her, and in the dim light she could see the weight he carried. "No, I'm not. And after tomorrow, when I don't show up for the most important board meeting in my company's history, I might not have any business at all." Maya stared at him, beginning to understand the magnitude of what Hurricane Delilah had really disrupted. But before she could respond, they heard Tommy crying from inside the house, and the moment was broken. As they hurried back inside to comfort the frightened child, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was harboring someone far more significant than she'd imagined, and that the real storm was just beginning. The second morning after Hurricane Delilah brought the distant sound of helicopters and the first signs that rescue operations were beginning. Maya woke to find Marcus already awake, sitting by the radio and scribbling notes on the back of an old envelope. "Any news?" she asked quietly, not wanting to wake the others. "They're prioritizing medical emergencies and nursing homes first," Marcus said without looking up. "Regular evacuations won't start until this afternoon, at the earliest." Maya noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his pen pressed too hard against the paper. "What are you writing?" Contingency plans. If I can't make it back today, there are things that need to happen. Instructions for my assistant, backup authorizations. He stopped writing and rubbed his eyes. Except none of it matters if I can't communicate with anyone. Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Are the helicopters coming for us? Eventually, Buddy, Maya said, scooping him up. Are you hungry? As they prepared breakfast, Maya couldn't help but notice how Marcus kept checking his phone obsessively. The sporadic signal would tease him with a single bar, then disappear completely. Each time, his frustration grew more visible. Uncle Marcus looks sad, Tommy whispered to Maya as she helped him with his cereal. Maya glanced over at the man who had become an unexpected fixture in their small group. Tommy was right. Beneath Marcus's controlled exterior, there was something that looked like grief. Around mid-morning, Mrs. Rodriguez made an observation that changed everything. She was sitting by the window, keeping watch for rescue vehicles, when she suddenly went very still. Maya, Venica, she called urgently. Maya approached the window, and Mrs. Rodriguez pointed at Marcus, who was outside trying to get better phone. Reception. That man. I know that face. What do you mean? Mrs. Rodriguez fumbled for her purse and pulled out a smartphone that somehow had survived the flood in a waterproof case. Her arthritic fingers moved slowly across the screen until she found what she was looking for. Mira, she said, holding up the phone. Maya's breath caught. On the screen was a news article with a photograph of Marcus, but this wasn't the waterlogged, stubble-faced man who had been sharing her living room. This was Marcus in an expensive suit, standing at a podium with Tech Haven Industries displayed prominently behind him. The headline read, Tech Haven CEO Marcus Blackwood, missing as hurricane. Delilah strikes Texas. Maya stared at the screen, her mind reeling. Marcus Blackwood. She knew that name. Everyone did. Tech Haven Industries was one of the largest technology companies in the world. Their software ran everything from hospital systems to banking, networks to the very phone she was holding. Locanosis? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Maya sank into a chair, still staring at the article. According to the report, Marcus Blackwood had been scheduled to fly from Houston to New York for a crucial board meeting. His private jet had been grounded due to the hurricane, and he had missed several important calls. The company's stock had dropped 12% overnight amid speculation about his absence. Maya? Sarah approached, carrying Tommy. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya looked up at Sarah, then at Tommy, then back at the phone screen. We need to talk when Marcus comes back inside. But before she could figure out how to handle this revelation, they heard shouting from outside. Marcus was standing in the front yard, gesturing frantically at something in the distance. Maya rushed to the door and saw what had captured his attention. A Coast Guard helicopter circling the neighborhood, its loudspeaker crackling with instructions. This is the United States Coast Guard. If you need immediate medical assistance, signal with a white cloth or towel. Non-emergency evacuations will begin at coordinates Alpha 7 in approximately 2 hours. Marcus was already back inside, his face transformed with the first genuine excitement Maya had seen from him. Alpha 7, that's the community center, about 6 blocks from here. If we can get there... Marcus, Maya interrupted, holding up Mrs. Rodriguez's phone. We need to talk. His eyes went to the screen, and Maya watched his face change. The mask of careful control slipped completely, replaced by something between resignation and relief. How long have you known? He asked quietly. About 5 minutes. Maya gestured for him to sit down. Is there anything else you want to tell us before we figure out how to get you home? Sarah looked between them, confused. What's going on? Marcus sat heavily at Maya's kitchen table and looked at the 3 women and 1 small boy who had become his temporary family. My name is Marcus Blackwood. I'm the CEO of Tech Haven Industries. Sarah's eyes widened. Tech Haven? The computer company? Among other things, yes. Marcus's voice was steady, but Maya could see the vulnerability underneath. We develop software and hardware for hospitals, schools, and government agencies. About 57,000 employees worldwide now. Tommy, who had been playing with his blocks, looked up with interest. "Are you rich?" The innocent question broke the tension, and Marcus actually smiled. "Yes, Tommy, I'm rich." "Do you have a big house?" "Several, actually." Mrs. Rodriguez had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. "If you're so important, why were you walking in the storm instead of being somewhere safe?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because I made a mistake. I thought I could control the situation, that I could wait until the last minute and still get out. I've spent my whole career believing that problems could be solved with enough money or the right technology." He looked around the modest kitchen. "I've never been in a situation where none of that mattered." Maya studied his face. "The board meeting you're missing, is it really that important? We're announcing a merger that will either secure the company's future or destroy it. The investors need to see stability, confidence. My absence is being interpreted as uncertainty, maybe even abandonment." Sarah frowned. "But surely they understand that you're trapped by a natural disaster." Marcus shook his head. "In my world, natural disasters are something that happen to other people. CEOs don't get stranded in floods. They have contingency plans, backup plans, and private helicopters." His voice carried a bitter edge. "Except I don't. I got trapped just like everyone else." Maya felt a strange mix of sympathy and frustration. "So, what happens now? Do we get you to that helicopter and pretend the last 2 days never happened?" The question hung in the air. Marcus looked around the room, at Tommy's carefully constructed blockhouses, at Mrs. Rodriguez's weathered hands folded in her lap, at Sarah's protective stance near her son, at Maya's direct challenging gaze. "I don't know," he admitted. "For the first time in 20 years, I honestly don't know what happens next." Outside, the Coast Guard helicopter was getting closer, and Maya realized they had a decision to make. They could get Marcus to the evacuation point, and he could return to his world of board meetings and stock prices. Or something else could happen, something none of them had planned for. But first, they had to survive the next few hours and figure out how to navigate floodwaters with an elderly woman, a small child, and one of the most recognizable businessmen. In America, getting to the evacuation point proved more treacherous than any of them had anticipated. The floodwater had risen overnight, and what had been knee-deep wading was now chest-high for Maya and potentially dangerous for Mrs. Rodriguez and Tommy. Marcus took charge with a decisiveness that reminded Maya exactly who he was. "We need flotation," he said, surveying Maya's garage. "Anything that can support weight." They fashioned a makeshift raft from an old air mattress, some pool noodles Maya had stored away, and duct tape. It wasn't pretty, but it would keep Mrs. Rodriguez and Tommy above water for the 6-block journey. As they prepared to leave, Marcus pulled Maya aside. "When we get to the evacuation point, there's going to be media. Probably a lot of it. Once word gets out that I'm here, you're worried about being seen with us," Maya said, and she couldn't keep the edge out of her voice. "No." Marcus's response was immediate and firm. "I'm worried about you being seen with me. Your life is about to change in ways you can't imagine. And you didn't ask for any of it." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine concern there. "What do you mean?" "By tonight, every news outlet in the country will want to interview the nurse who saved Marcus Blackwood. They'll dig into your background, camp outside your house, analyze every word you say, your privacy, your normal life. It'll be gone." The weight of what he was saying hit Maya suddenly. She thought about her quiet existence, her work at the hospital, her simple routines. "Can't you just not mention us?" Marcus shook his head. "Mrs. Rodriguez already posted about recognizing me on social media. Look, He showed Maya his phone, which had finally connected to a stronger signal. Mrs. Rodriguez's Facebook post, a picture of the news article about Marcus, alongside a selfie she'd somehow taken without anyone noticing, already had hundreds of shares and comments. "Oh no," Maya breathed. "It gets worse. Someone tagged Tech Haven's official account. My communications team is probably having a heart attack right now." As if summoned by his words, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Jennifer Chen, executive assistant. "I have to take this," Marcus said apologetically, stepping away. Maya couldn't hear the entire conversation, but she caught fragments. Yes, I'm alive. No, I can't get to the board meeting. The merger will have to wait. I don't care what the stock price is doing." When he returned, his expression was grim. "The board is threatening to call an emergency vote of no confidence if I don't return immediately. They think I've had some kind of breakdown." "Have you?" Sarah asked quietly. She'd been listening while helping Tommy into his life jacket. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Maybe 3 days ago I would have called in the National Guard to get me out of here if necessary. Now," he looked around at their small group. "Now I'm not sure what's important anymore." The journey to the evacuation point took over an hour. Maya and Marcus took turns pulling the makeshift raft, while Sarah and Tommy walked alongside, holding on to the edges. Mrs. Rodriguez sat regally in the center, directing their route with the authority of someone who'd lived in the neighborhood for 60 years. "Turn left at the Blue House," she called out. "The street floods less there." As they got closer to the community center, they began encountering other evacuees. Families carrying suitcases, elderly people being helped by neighbors, children crying from exhaustion and fear. Maya noticed how Marcus observed everything, with that calculating look she'd come to recognize. "You're planning something," she said during a brief rest. "I'm always planning something. It's who I am." Marcus adjusted his grip on the raft. "But for the first time, I'm not sure any of my plans matter." They reached the evacuation point to find controlled chaos. Coast Guard personnel were organizing people into groups, prioritizing medical emergencies and families with small children. News crews had already arrived, their cameras capturing the human drama of disaster recovery. Maya felt Marcus tense beside her as he spotted the reporters. "Once they see me, everything changes," he said quietly. "Mr. Blackwood," a Coast Guard officer approached them, having clearly recognized Marcus despite his disheveled appearance. "Sir, we've been looking for you. We have instructions to prioritize your evacuation." The officer spoke into his radio, and immediately Maya could see the ripple effect beginning. Other personnel turned to look. Someone pointed, and within minutes, reporters were pushing closer. "Marcus Blackwood, Channel 7 News, can you tell us where you've been?" "Mr. Blackwood, is it true Tech Haven's stock has dropped 20% since your disappearance? Who are these people with you?" The questions came like a barrage, and Maya instinctively moved closer to Tommy, shielding him from the cameras. Sarah looked overwhelmed, and Mrs. Rodriguez seemed simultaneously delighted and frightened by the attention. Marcus stepped forward, and Maya watched him transform. His posture straightened, his voice took on the authoritative tone she imagined he used in boardrooms, and suddenly he was no longer the vulnerable man who'd shared her living room. "I've been staying with a local resident who provided shelter during the hurricane," he said calmly. "Maya Chen is a nurse who opened her home to strangers, possibly saving our lives." The cameras immediately swung toward Maya, who felt exposed and unprepared. I just did what anyone would do," she managed. "Can you tell us about your experience with Mr. Blackwood? What was it like having one of America's richest men in your home? Did you know who he was?" Maya looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "I knew he was a person who needed help," she said firmly. "That's all that mattered." A Coast Guard lieutenant approached Marcus. "Sir, We have a helicopter standing by to take you directly to Houston. Your company has been calling every hour. Marcus looked at the helicopter, then back at Maya and the others. For a moment, Maya thought he might actually refuse, might choose to stay with them rather than return to his corporate responsibilities. Instead, he turned to the lieutenant. "I'll need a few minutes." He walked back to their small group, and Maya could see the internal struggle on his face. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is where our paths diverge." Sarah stepped forward first. "Thank you for helping us during the storm. You're not what I expected a CEO to be like." Mrs. Rodriguez hugged him tightly, speaking rapid Spanish that made him smile despite the circumstances. Tommy looked up at him with the serious expression children get when they sense important moments. "You know about taking care of people. You know about making decisions under pressure. You know about seeing what's needed and making it happen." His voice was warm with conviction. "You're exactly who should be running medical relief programs." Tommy tugged on Maya's scrubs again. "Are you going to work with Uncle Marcus?" Maya looked down at the little boy who had somehow become central to her life, then at Sarah, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. These people had become her family during 2 days of shared crisis, and now they were being offered a chance to stay connected, to build something meaningful together. "I need time to think," Maya said finally. "Of course. But Maya, there's one more thing. I'm flying down to Galveston tomorrow. There's something I want to show you, all of you, something I've been working on since I got back." After Marcus hung up, Maya, Sarah, and Tommy sat in the hospital parking lot, processing what they'd just heard. The news van was still there, waiting for her to emerge, but suddenly it seemed less important. "He's serious about this," Sarah said, quietly. "The foundation, the programs, all of it. It seems like it." Maya watched Tommy build an imaginary structure with his hands, apparently unbothered by the life-changing conversation happening around him. "Maya, what if this is real? What if we actually could make a difference for people going through what we went through?" Maya thought about her grandmother's words. "Sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be." 3 weeks ago, she'd been a nurse working extra shifts to pay her mortgage. Now she was being offered a chance to help people on a scale she'd never imagined. "Let's see what he wants to show us tomorrow," Maya said finally. "Then we'll decide." As they walked toward the hospital together, Maya realized that Hurricane Delilah hadn't just changed the landscape of Galveston. It had fundamentally altered the trajectory of all their lives, creating possibilities that none of them could have foreseen. The question now was whether they were brave enough to step into those possibilities, to trust that the connection they'd formed during 2 days of crisis could become the foundation for something extraordinary. Tomorrow, Maya thought, they would find out what Marcus Blackwood had been building in the 3 weeks since their hurricane family had been scattered to the winds. And tomorrow, she would have to decide whether she was ready to let Hurricane Delilah change her life one more time. Maya stood on the same street where she'd first rescued Marcus, Sarah, and Tommy, but the neighborhood was barely recognizable. What had been a disaster zone 3 weeks ago was now a construction site, buzzing with activity. Workers in hard hats moved purposefully between partially rebuilt homes, while architects consulted blueprints and engineers tested new infrastructure. Marcus stood beside her, but he looked different too. Gone was the expensive suit and polished corporate demeanor. Instead, he wore work boots, jeans, and a T-shirt with Delilah Foundation printed across the chest. His hands, which had once only known keyboards and conference room tables, were now calloused from actual construction work. "I don't understand," Maya said, watching a crew install what appeared to be solar panels on Mrs. Rodriguez's rebuilt house. "How did you do all this in 3 weeks?" Marcus smiled, and Maya realized it was the first completely genuine smile she'd seen from him since the helicopter had taken him away. I called in every favor I had, liquidated several investments, and hired the best disaster reconstruction team in the country. When you have resources and you're actually motivated to use them properly, things move quickly. Sarah emerged from what had been Maya's house, though it too was completely transformed. The modest two-story home had been rebuilt into something larger and more resilient, with storm-resistant features Maya had never even heard of. "Maya, you have to see the inside," Sarah called out. "It's incredible." Tommy ran ahead of them, his small feet pattering across a new walkway that connected several houses. "Look, Aunt Maya, Uncle Marcus built a whole neighborhood." As they walked through the rebuilt area, Marcus explained his vision. "This isn't just reconstruction. It's reimagining how communities can be designed to withstand disasters and support each other. Every house has backup power, water filtration systems, and communication equipment that works even when the grid fails." Maya stopped at what had been Mrs. Rodriguez's house. The elderly woman was sitting on her new porch, directing workers with the same authority she'd used to guide them through floodwaters. When she saw Maya, her face lit up. "Mija, come see what that boy of yours has done." Mrs. Rodriguez gave Maya a tour of her new home, which was larger than her original house and designed specifically for aging in place. Wider doorways, grab bars, a first-floor bedroom, and a medical alert system that connected directly to Galveston General. "But Mrs. Rodriguez, how can you afford all this?" Maya asked quietly. The elderly woman waved dismissively. "Marcus says it's an investment in community resilience, whatever that means. I just know I have a beautiful home, and my cats have their own little outdoor enclosure." Marcus appeared behind them, overhearing the conversation. "Mrs. Rodriguez was the first resident to agree to participate in the pilot program. We are documenting everything, costs, timeline, community impact, to create a model that can be replicated in other disaster-prone areas." As they walked back outside, Maya began to understand the scope of what Marcus had created. This wasn't just charity or guilt-driven spending. It was a systematic approach to disaster recovery that addressed not just physical rebuilding, but community resilience. "The foundation purchased 12 houses in this neighborhood," Marcus explained. "We're rebuilding them to withstand Category 5 hurricanes, but more importantly, we're designing them to function as community resource centers during emergencies." He pointed to a house 3 doors down from Maya's rebuilt home. "That one has the medical equipment and supplies. Sarah's helping design the layout based on what you needed during the hurricane. Another house has backup communications equipment. A third has emergency food and water storage." Maya felt overwhelmed by the scale of it all. "Marcus, this must have cost $15 million so far." "But Maya, that's not the important number." Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed her a detailed presentation. "We've created 30 permanent jobs just in this neighborhood. The construction crews are all local hires, and we're training residents in disaster preparedness and response. This one project will generate economic activity for years." Sarah joined them, carrying a folder thick with documents. "Maya, he wants to show you the medical center." They walked 2 blocks to what had been an empty lot before the hurricane. Now a sleek, modern building was nearing completion. The sign read, "Delilah Community Health and Emergency Response Center." "This is where you'd be based if you accept the position," Marcus said, unlocking the front door. "Come see." The interior took Maya's breath away. It was designed like a hybrid between a family practice clinic and an emergency command center. Exam rooms were equipped with telemedicine technology, allowing remote consultations with specialists. A supply room was stocked with everything needed for disaster response. Most impressively, the entire facility was designed to operate independently during emergencies, with its own power, water, and communication systems. "The idea is that during normal times, this serves as a community health clinic," Marcus explained. But when disasters strike, it becomes a coordination center for medical relief efforts. You'd oversee both functions. Maya walked through the facility, her mind racing. One room was clearly designed as a command center with multiple screens and communication equipment. Another was set up for surgical procedures. A third contained enough medical supplies to treat hundreds of people. Marcus, I'm just a nurse. I don't have training for this kind of responsibility. Maya? Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her directly. 3 weeks ago, you managed a crisis involving multiple people with limited resources and no communication with the outside world. You made medical decisions, coordinated care, and kept everyone safe and calm. That's exactly the kind of leadership this job requires. Tommy had found his way to a children's area within the clinic, complete with medical equipment sized for pediatric patients. Look, it's like a regular doctor's office, but for kids. Sarah joined Maya in examining the facility. The foundation is partnering with 3 nursing schools and 2 medical schools, she said, consulting her folder. Students would rotate through here for disaster response training. You'd be teaching the next generation of medical professionals how to work in crisis situations. Maya felt a familiar tug in her chest, the same feeling she'd had when she decided to become a nurse, but the scale of this opportunity was almost paralyzing. What about my job at the hospital? My life here? Galveston General has already agreed to partner with the foundation, Marcus said. You'd maintain your credentials and could pick up shifts there whenever you wanted. But Maya, this job would let you help people during disasters all over the country, maybe internationally. They spent the next hour touring the rest of the facility. Marcus had thought of everything: staff housing for volunteers during disasters, a training center for community preparedness programs, even a small apartment where Maya could live if she chose. As they finished the tour, Maya realized that Marcus had been watching her carefully, studying her reactions. "You're nervous about my answer," she observed. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "This whole foundation, everything I'm trying to build, it only works if I have the right people running it. People who understand what it's really like to help others during their worst moments." "What happens if I say no?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll find someone else and hope they're half as good as you would be. But Maya, I don't think I can do this without you. The foundation board agrees. They've already approved your salary, benefits, everything contingent on your acceptance." The Tao. "You bored?" Marcus smiled mysteriously. "Come on, there's one more thing I want to show you." They walked back to Maya's rebuilt house, where a small crowd had gathered in the living room. Maya was surprised to see several familiar faces: colleagues from the hospital, neighbors who had returned to the area, and others she didn't recognize. "Maya," Marcus said formally, "I'd like you to meet the board of directors of the Delilah Foundation." Maya's jaw dropped as she recognized the faces. Dr. Patricia Williams, the woman who had offered Sarah the scholarship, was there. So was Maya's, a former supervisor from the hospital, the fire chief who had coordinated the hurricane response, and several other community leaders. "We've been meeting for the past week," Dr. Williams said. "Marcus has shared his vision for the foundation, and we all agree that you're the right person to lead the medical relief programs." Maya's former supervisor, Linda Chen, stepped forward. "Maya, in 15 years of nursing, I've never seen anyone handle crisis situations the way you do. This foundation could help thousands of people, but only if someone with your skills and compassion is running the medical side." The fire chief nodded. "We've all read the reports about what you did during the hurricane. Taking in strangers, managing limited resources, making tough decisions under pressure. That's exactly what disaster relief requires." Maya looked around the room at faces filled with expectation and hope. These were people she respected, leaders in their fields, and they were all looking to her to make this work. "I need to ask something," Maya said finally. "Marcus, why me? Really? You could hire experienced disaster relief professionals, people with advanced degrees and years of training." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because 3 weeks ago, when you opened your door to strangers in a storm, you didn't think about their backgrounds or their resources or what they could do for you. You just saw people who needed help, and you helped them. That's who I want running medical relief programs, someone who sees people first." Tommy, who had been listening with the serious expression children get during important adult conversations, suddenly spoke up. "Aunt Maya, remember what you said about building hurricane-proof houses? Uncle Marcus built them, but he needs you to help take care of the people inside." The innocent wisdom of the 5-year-old cut through all of Maya's uncertainty. She looked around the room again, at the board members who believed in her, at Sarah, who had become like a sister, at Marcus, who had transformed from stranger to friend, to something she couldn't quite define, and at Tommy, who somehow always knew exactly what to say. "Okay," Maya said quietly. "Okay, I'll do it." The room erupted in applause and congratulations, but Maya barely heard them. She was thinking about her grandmother's words, "Sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be." 6 months later, Maya stood in the same living room, but now it served as the informal headquarters for the Delilah Foundation's first major relief operation. Hurricane Francine had struck Louisiana, and Maya was coordinating medical teams across 3 parishes. Sarah, now a trained program coordinator, was managing supply distribution from her office at the foundation. Tommy had started kindergarten and spent his afternoons at the community center, helping distribute care packages and charming everyone he met. Mrs. Rodriguez had become the unofficial grandmother of the entire neighborhood, hosting Sunday dinners for foundation staff and volunteers. Her house had become a gathering place where important decisions were made over her famous tamales. Marcus had completely stepped away from Tech Haven Industries, though he remained a major shareholder. He spent his days working alongside construction, crews, meeting with local officials, and learning everything he could about disaster response and recovery. "Maya," he said, appearing in the doorway with his usual tablet and coffee. "The teams in Louisiana are requesting additional trauma supplies, and the Red Cross wants to partner with us on the next deployment." Maya looked up from her own planning documents. "How many people are we helping now?" "This operation, about 8,000 people across the 3 parishes. But since we started 6 months ago, the Foundation has assisted in relief efforts for 43 disasters across 12 states. Maya shook her head in amazement. "I never imagined it would grow this fast." "Neither did I. But Maya, I want to ask you something." Marcus sat down across from her. "Are you happy? Really happy? Because if this isn't what you want, if you miss your old life—" Maya looked around the room where they'd first sheltered together during Hurricane Delilah. The walls were covered with maps, charts, and photos from relief operations. Her laptop screen showed medical supply inventories and deployment schedules. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from field teams. It was chaotic, demanding, and completely different from her quiet life as a hospital nurse. It was also the most fulfilling work she'd ever done. "Marcus, do you remember what my grandmother used to say? That we're all just walking each other home?" Marcus nodded. "I think this is what she meant. We're not just providing medical care or rebuilding houses. We're helping people find their way back to safety, back to hope." Maya smiled. "I've never been happier in my life." That evening, as had become their tradition, the extended family gathered at Mrs. Rodriguez's house for dinner. Maya, Marcus, Sarah, Tommy, Mrs. Rodriguez, and whoever else happened to be working with the foundation that week. As they sat around the table, Tommy raised his juice box in an impromptu toast. "To Hurricane Delilah," the adults laughed and raised their own glasses. "To Hurricane Delilah," they echoed. "Why are we toasting a hurricane?" Sarah asked, smiling. "Because," Tommy said with 5-year-old wisdom, "it brought us all together." Maya looked around the table at the faces of her chosen family, people who had started as strangers in a storm and had become the most important relationships in her life. Hurricane Delilah had destroyed her old world, but in its place she'd found something extraordinary, a purpose that felt like destiny, work that mattered, and connections that would last a lifetime. Sometimes, Maya thought, the most devastating storms clear the way for the most beautiful beginnings. Outside, the weather was calm, but Maya knew that somewhere another storm was forming, and when it made landfall, the Delilah Foundation would be ready. They would bring hope to people in their darkest hours, just as they had found hope in each other during one unforgettable hurricane night. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. As the months turned into a full year, the Delilah Foundation's impact rippled far beyond what any of them had imagined. Maya found herself testifying before Congress about disaster preparedness, consulting with FEMA on community resilience strategies, and speaking at international conferences about innovative medical relief approaches. The foundation had grown from Marcus's initial vision into a multifaceted organization that employed over 300 people across 15 states. They had responded to wildfires in California, tornadoes in Oklahoma, flooding in North Carolina, and even an earthquake in Puerto Rico. Each deployment refined their methods and expanded their capabilities, but it was the smaller, quieter impacts that truly measured their success, like the family in Mississippi who credited the Foundation's mental health support programs with saving their marriage after a devastating tornado, or the community college in Texas that now offered disaster response certification because of the Foundation's educational partnerships, or the 12-year-old girl in Florida who wanted to become a doctor after meeting Maya during a hurricane relief operation. Maya's own transformation had been perhaps the most dramatic of all. The shy, small-town nurse who had once hidden from reporters now confidently addressed roomfuls of emergency management professionals. She had completed advanced training in disaster medicine, earned certifications in incident command, and published research papers on community-based medical relief strategies. Yet she never forgot the fundamental lesson from Hurricane Delilah: that in crisis, people don't need heroes, they need neighbors. Sarah had become one of the Foundation's most effective advocates, using her own story to connect with communities facing disaster. Her program, Voices from the Storm, collected testimonials from disaster survivors and turned them into powerful educational materials. She had spoken at over 50 universities, training the next generation of social workers and community organizers. The scholarship program that had changed her life had now helped over 400 single mothers across the Southeast. Sarah worked personally with each recipient, understanding that financial support was only part of what they needed to rebuild their lives. Tommy, now 6½, had become something of a mascot for the Foundation. His drawings of hurricane-proof houses were used in children's disaster preparedness materials, and his innocent observations often provided insights that adult experts missed. He attended Foundation events with the confidence of someone who had never known a world where helping strangers wasn't the most natural thing to do. Mrs. Rodriguez had embraced her role as the Foundation's unofficial cultural consultant, ensuring that relief efforts respected the traditions and needs of diverse communities. Her house remained the informal gathering place where major decisions were made, and her Sunday dinners had become legendary among Foundation staff. At 81, she had found a new purpose, traveling to disaster sites as a peer counselor, offering comfort to elderly survivors who felt forgotten by younger relief workers. Her gentle wisdom and unshakable faith had helped hundreds of people find hope in their darkest moments. Marcus had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all. The businessman who had once measured success in stock prices and quarterly earnings now evaluated impact in lives saved and communities strengthened. He had divested himself of most of his corporate holdings, keeping only enough to ensure the foundation's long-term financial stability. He had also discovered talents he never knew he possessed. During a flood response in Iowa, he had worked 18-hour days alongside local farmers, learning to operate heavy machinery and coordinate complex logistics operations. Community leaders, who had initially been skeptical of the wealthy outsider, had come to respect his genuine commitment and hands-on approach. The Foundation's most ambitious project was just getting underway, a partnership with 3 universities to establish the first graduate degree program in disaster community medicine. Maya would serve as the program director, developing curriculum that combined traditional medical training with community organizing, cultural competency, and long-term resilience planning. "We're not just training doctors and nurses," Maya explained, to the university consortium. "We're preparing a new kind of healthcare professional, one who understands that medical care in disasters isn't just about treating injuries, but about healing communities." The program had attracted applicants from around the world, including physicians from hurricane-prone regions of the Caribbean, nurses from earthquake zones in South America, and public health workers from flood-vulnerable areas of Southeast Asia. Maya was both excited and humbled by the responsibility of shaping how future generations would approach disaster medicine. On a quiet Tuesday evening, exactly 18 months after Hurricane Delilah, Maya sat in her office at the Community Health Center reviewing applications for the graduate program. Outside, Galveston was experiencing typical spring weather, warm, humid, with the kind of afternoon thunderstorms that reminded everyone of the more serious storms that would inevitably come. Marcus appeared in her doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the slightly mischievous expression that usually meant he had news to share. "Tell me," Maya said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The World Health Organization wants to fund a pilot program based on our model," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "They're looking at hurricane-prone regions in the Philippines and cyclone areas in Bangladesh." Maya felt a familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The Foundation's work was gaining international recognition, but with that came pressure to expand faster than they could maintain quality. "What did you tell them? That we'd consider it if they're willing to commit to a 5-year partnership and let us train their local personnel properly?" Marcus grinned. "I also told them that any international expansion would require you to approve the medical protocols personally. Marcus, I can't travel internationally while we're launching the graduate program," which is exactly what I told them. If they want Delilah Foundation quality, they wait for Delilah Foundation timing. Maya smiled, appreciating how well Marcus had learned to balance ambition with sustainability. The early days of the Foundation had been marked by a few near disasters. When they had tried to take on too much too quickly, they had learned to grow strategically, ensuring that each new initiative built on proven successes. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Tommy has been asking about visiting disaster sites with us." "Absolutely not. He's 6 years old. Sarah thinks it might be educational. And Mrs. Rodriguez pointed out that he's already seen more disaster recovery than most adults ever will." Maya considered this. Tommy had indeed grown up surrounded by the Foundation's work, and his questions were becoming increasingly sophisticated. Just last week, he had asked why some communities recovered from disasters faster than others, leading to a discussion about socio-economic factors that would have impressed graduate students. "What kind of visit?" "Nothing dangerous. The community," College in Austin has invited us to speak about the Foundation's educational programs. Tommy could see how disaster response training works. Maybe meet some of the students. Maya nodded slowly. Educational visits only. No active disaster sites until he's much older. Agreed. Though I suspect by the time he's old enough, he'll be teaching us things we never thought of. That evening, the extended family gathered for their weekly dinner at Mrs. Rodriguez's house. The tradition had evolved over the months to include rotating guests, Foundation staff, community partners, visiting researchers, and anyone else who happened to be working on projects that week. Tonight's group included Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an emergency medicine physician who was developing trauma protocols for the graduate program, and Carlos Mendoza, a civil engineer who was designing the next generation of disaster-resistant community centers. As they shared Mrs. Rodriguez's latest culinary experiment, a fusion of traditional Mexican flavors with Cajun influences she had learned during the Louisiana deployments, the conversation naturally turned to the Foundation's future. "I've been thinking about something Tommy said last week," Dr. Walsh mentioned. "He asked why we only help people after disasters happen instead of before." Sarah laughed. "He's been on that kick lately. Yesterday he asked me why we don't just move all the houses away from where hurricanes hit." "It's not actually a bad question," Carlos said thoughtfully. "We do a lot of work on making communities more resilient, but most of our interventions are still reactive." Maya had been thinking about this same issue. What would proactive disaster medicine look like? The question sparked a discussion that lasted well past Tommy's bedtime. By the time the dishes were cleared, they had outlined a concept for community health programs that would strengthen social connections and build local capacity long before disasters struck. "We could pilot it right here in Galveston," Marcus suggested. "Use this neighborhood as a testing ground for truly proactive community resilience." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been listening quietly while serving dessert, finally spoke up. "You know, when I was a girl in Mexico, every neighborhood had someone who knew how to deliver babies, set broken bones, treat fevers. Not doctors, just people who cared about their neighbors and learned what they needed to know. Community health promoters," Dr. Walsh said, nodding. "It's actually an evidence-based approach. Train community members in basic health skills and health outcomes improve across the entire population." Maya felt the familiar spark of an idea taking shape. What if we combined that with disaster preparedness? Train neighborhood health champions who could provide medical support during emergencies, but also work on prevention and wellness during normal times. "Like Aunt Maya, but in every neighborhood," Tommy called from the living room, where he was supposed to be getting ready for bed. The adults exchanged glances, recognizing the wisdom in the child's simple observation. Over the following weeks, the idea evolved into a formal proposal. The Community Health Champion program would train volunteers in each neighborhood to provide basic medical care, coordinate disaster response, and advocate for community health needs. Participants would receive ongoing education, regular practice, scenarios, and connection to professional medical resources. The pilot program launched 6 months later in 12 neighborhoods across Galveston County. Maya personally trained the first cohort of 48 health champions, ranging in age from 19 to 73, representing the full diversity of their communities. Among the participants was Maria Santos, a young mother who had survived Hurricane Harvey and wanted to help her neighbors prepare for future storms. There was also Robert Chen, a retired engineer who had moved to Galveston to be closer to his grandchildren and discovered a passion for community organizing. The most surprising participant was David Thompson, a former oil industry executive who had lost his job during the pandemic and was looking for ways to contribute meaningfully to his community. His business background proved invaluable in helping organize supply chains and coordinate resources. As the program gained momentum, Maya began to see something beautiful emerging. The health champions weren't just learning medical skills. They were building the kind of deep community connections that made neighborhoods truly resilient. They were creating the social infrastructure that could support people through any kind of crisis. 2 years after Hurricane Delilah, Maya stood once again on Maple Street, but now it bustled with activity for entirely different reasons. The neighborhood had become a destination for visitors wanting to see innovative approaches to community resilience. Delegations from disaster-prone regions around the world toured the rebuilt homes, the community health center, and the network of trained health champions. But the real measure of success wasn't in the visiting delegations or the research papers or the international recognition. It was in the way neighbors looked out for each other, the way children played safely in streets designed to handle flooding, the way elderly residents like Mrs. Rodriguez could age in place with confidence that their community would support them. It was, in fact, that when the next hurricane inevitably came, this community would be ready, not just with better buildings and emergency supplies, but with stronger relationships and deeper trust. Maya thought about her grandmother's words. Once more, we're all just walking each other home. Hurricane Delilah had scattered them all to the winds, but in finding their way back together, they had discovered something more precious than safety. They had found their purpose. The storm that had once threatened to destroy everything had instead become the foundation for something beautiful and enduring. And in helping others weather their own storms, Maya and her chosen family had learned that sometimes the most powerful way to heal from disaster is to ensure that others never have to face it alone. The story that had begun with strangers seeking shelter had become a testament to the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people decide to take care of each other. And as Maya watched Tommy help a visiting group of children understand how their neighborhood worked, she knew that the lessons of Hurricane Delilah would continue rippling outward for generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.